Let's talk about all of the books that I read in the month of March. In March, I ended up picking up 7 books, and one of those was nonfiction. The rest were all fiction books. We also had quite the array, both in terms of genre and my rating. There was a book I gave 2 stars to, and one that I gave 5 stars to. So it was really all over the place. I did notice, however, that there were 2 major themes that popped up. One of them was around grief. I read 4 books surrounding that topic, and one around reflection or looking back at your life earlier, with one exception, which was that nonfiction book that I read. So why don't we start off talking about that one? That was The New Age of Sexism by Laura Bates. So earlier this year and late last year, I picked up a lot of books surrounding the use of AI, and I just wanted to understand the topic and people's concerns. And a lot of those books that I read really focused on the impacts of generative AI down the line, like climate change, the way that it disproportionately affects people of color, to even more dystopian type consequences, like what happens when generative AI no longer needs us, when it becomes more intelligent than humans. However, in this book, in The New Age of Sexism, Laura Bates really centers us back into the present and talks about the way that AI is currently perpetuating systems of oppression. Her particular focus in this is women, sexism, and misogyny. I think to me this was a good reminder of the consequences of unfettered use of AI without any regulation or legislation around how it's being used. Personally made me question this idea of jumping on camera, sharing my thoughts about books that I read, and just being online. The content of this book is a mixture of very specific and well-researched topics, as well as a mixture of her own personal experiences that she herself has had. I will say the beginning of this book felt very well-researched. It was very in-depth, and then maybe like the last 30% of it felt a little bit repetitive and maybe didn't go as in-depth. I will say that she does end this on a good note. She does talk about ways in which AI is being used in very innovative and actually really good ways. And even though she doesn't provide necessarily solutions to everything that she mentions, there is a path forward. The next 6 books that I'm going to talk about are all fiction books. Why don't we start with the theme around reflection or looking back? And actually, the first one that I'm going to talk about is one that didn't necessarily work for me. This is Hell's Heart by Alexis Hall. This is a sapphic space opera, Moby Dick inspired tale about a captain who goes by the name of A, who is on a revenge mission against a leviathan that took something from her. That premise alone, I was like, yes, sign me up. I thought it was going to be this like super fun, fast-paced space adventure. However, it ended up being quite the opposite. It was quite slow moving. There was a lot of info dumping and a lot of reflection. Now, this is told from the perspective of one of the captain's crewmates who is sharing this story as they are looking back in a memoir type of way. Because the story is very slow moving and info dumpy, the author tries to offset this with a lot of sex scenes, a lot of snark, and a lot of witty moments thrown in there. I did listen to this as an audiobook, and I feel like if I hadn't been listening to the audiobook, I would have probably DNF'd this. It was just because I had the audiobook that I was able to finish it to the end, because around the 70% mark, I was basically done with it. It was just too repetitive. It was too long. So that was a 2 out of 5 for me. Unfortunately, it did not work for me. The other book that I read in March that had a theme around reflection or looking back is called Repetiiton. This is by Vigdis Hjorth. This was translated by Charlotte Barslund from the Norwegian. So this was actually my 5-star read for the month. I ended up loving this book. It completely took me by surprise. It's actually one that's also quite slow moving and very reflective. However, this one is just over 100 pages, so it has enough room to breathe, but not enough where it becomes repetitive or you feel like we're not really going anywhere. In this one, we are following a novelist who in her late life starts to reflect and reminisce about a time when her family went through this really big event back when she was 16 years old. We get thrown back into her life when she was a teenager living at home under her mother's thumb, constantly being judged, constantly being analyzed, constantly being taken apart. This was such an anxiety-inducing book for me. I really felt like I was being oppressed. Like I'm in this oppressive environment where I'm constantly being watched for every decision that I make. The story is also told in this sort of stream of consciousness way that just adds to this repetitive nature of being watched and being judged. The end also took me by surprise. The event that takes place can be triggering for some people, so make sure to look up trigger warnings before diving in. The next 4 books that I ended up reading all revolve around the theme of grief. This was completely like coincidental. I did not plan this, but that's how it ended up being. I guess I'll start off by talking about my least favorite of those 4. This is Bochica by Carolina Florez-Cerchiaro, and this is a gothic horror Latin American novel. So Bochica is this gothic horror historical fiction book set in 1920s Colombia that leans into the myths and tales of the Muisca people in Colombia. It's also an exploration of identity and family secrets that will tear you apart. The story revolves around our main character, Antonia, who years prior, her mom ended up dying under mysterious circumstances. A lot of people think that her mother unalived herself by jumping off of a cliff into a waterfall down below. Her and her dad end up moving away, and now that same house that they lived in is being renovated into a hotel, and they are being pulled back into this house. Now, as Antonia and her father are pulled back into this house hotel, she starts to have these very vivid nightmares, and she begins to question whether her mom really unalived herself or if there's something else going on. Without going into spoilers, there were parts of this novel that reminded me of Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. That's a book that I adore. I love that book. This one didn't quite work for me. It's interesting because at times it felt so long, like nothing was happening, and then other parts it didn't feel long enough. Some scenes felt like they really dragged on and like they were very long, and then all of a sudden something happened really quickly and we moved on to the next scene. I think there was just a pacing issue with this book, and because of that I just couldn't love it, but I enjoyed my time while reading this, and maybe it's a book that I'll revisit later. When I Was Death by Alexis Henderson is this young adult horror novel about grief, about sisterhood, and about the way in which grief can almost make you feel like a ghost of yourself, haunting yourself and not being able to move forward. In it, we follow our main character, Rosalind. Her sister, Her sister Adeline died under mysterious circumstances. She was found out in the woods, and Rosalind just can't get over the death of her sister. So when a caravan of these mysterious girls rolls in through town, who also happen to be the last girls who spent the summer with Adeline the year prior, Rosalind decides to go on this road trip with them. And what she ends up finding out is that these girls have made a pact with death to go around and doing his bidding, and now she must decide if she wants to join them in order to find out what really happened to her sister. I feel like I'm at an age where whenever I read a young adult novel, I enjoy it in the moment, but then I often find myself thinking, wow, I am a lot older than this. I do not see myself reflected in these books anymore, or I think I would have really loved this when I was younger. This is one that still resonated with me right now, and I think this shows that young adult books can really be for anyone. Yes, it's a story about coming of age. Yes, it's about these girls who are extremely codependent, but it's also this beautiful story about finding yourself again after you've lost the person that anchored you in the world. I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4 out of 5. In March, I also read The Other Moctezuma Girls. This is by Sofia Robleda. This is a historical fiction novel that is set in 1551 in Tenochtitlan, Mexico, and this is really a reclamation of history after the Spanish conquest. Now, in this one, we're following our main character, Isabel, as she goes on this quest to find out more about her mother after she passes. She, her sister, and one of her brothers end up going on a quest to find these letters that were left for them by their mother, in which she basically shares her life story. The format of this is in a dual perspective. We're following Isabel and her siblings in the present, and then we're also getting the perspective of the letters as her mother wrote them, and they're narrated by 2 completely different people. For some reason, books about quests don't really work for me. I get tired of them very easily, but this one really worked. This is what I wish Malinali was. Malinali is another historical fiction / magical realism book that came out last year, also around this time period. That one focuses on La Malinche. It felt like it was trying to be both historical and fantasy without really committing to either, but this one just really works for me. I really liked both of the perspectives. I thought it was really well written. It was engrossing. And again, for the fact that it was a quest book, I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. The last book that I ended up reading is The Valley of Vengeful Ghost. This is by Kin Fu, and this is a literary horror novel about codependence, guilt, and grief. Now imagine you are going through the worst period of your life. Your mother recently passed away, and she was your anchor to the world. Now in order to fulfill her final wishes, you go and buy a model home that is within your budget because everything else is being bought and you don't have the funds to make a good offer. And you think you're finally getting some respite. You think you're finally able to have a new opportunity to move forward. And so you buy this house, and this house slowly starts to tear your life apart. The Valley of Vengeful Ghost is this character-driven, slow-moving novel that really blurs the lines between reality and fantasy, reality and dreams, or nightmares. It's not the book that I expected going in. I thought this was going to be more of a horror-leaning haunted house story. Instead, we follow Eleanor as she is dealing with mundane things. She's moving into this new house. She is buying groceries. She is getting her house inspected. We are listening to her conversation. She's a therapist. We're listening to her therapy conversations that she's having. And among this, there's this sense that something isn't quite right. She's also, for the first time, being an adult, being independent without anyone to lean on, and she's not getting everything quite right. I was just sucked in by this really well-written character. She can be frustrating at times, and the decisions that she makes, I was completely enthralled. It just reminded me of how messy my early 20s were, and figuring things out for the first time. It was also a very atmospheric read. I felt like I was there with Eleanor throughout the entire book. I ended up loving it. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. So those were all of the books that I read in the month of March. Like I said, it was quite the mixed bag. I'm hoping to have a much better reading experience in April. I'm going to do these like arc takedown or arc tackle series because I need to read my arcs. But yeah, those were all of the books that I read. I would love to know what was your favorite book in March. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.